today we woke up with some kind of shocking, kind of previously announced news about the IMF deal with El Salvador, and Bitcoiners all feeling like they've been slapped in the face or something. We have different takes. It's gonna take time to process the news, but yeah, Mike, we can go into the specifics about the deal and what that is gonna bring to the Bitcoin adoption here.
Yeah, let's talk about it. All right. So when I went on Twitter this morning, I think one of the first tweets I saw was from Samson Mao, and he basically said, "Hey, we know now what the language in the IMF regarding confined means, right? It means no more buying Bitcoin for El Salvador, no more mining Bitcoin for El Salvador, and there's a bunch of other little details there too. Like I think they have to disclose their public addresses, and the only way that they can acquire Bitcoin now is through
seizing it,
yeah,
for illegal activities,
which is ominous, right? Doesn't make me feel good as a Bitcoiner here.
Well, if you can make a difference on how El Salvador have stacked Bitcoin compared to other countries, is exactly that. They bought it. In other countries, they just seized it from illegal activities. So that was a huge difference. But now, for the IMF to be able to lend the money to El Salvador, purchasing and mining Bitcoin is no longer to be a thing anymore. I remember, it was very straightforward, the purchases of Bitcoin in the beginning. Then El Salvador started buying it daily. And it was very well known because of mining and the volcano energy and all that. It was a pretty popular thing.
When I first heard El Salvador announce that they were making Bitcoin legal tender and they were basically moving towards a Bitcoin standard, that's what made the whole thing interesting, right? Because look, we got grassroots movements and circular economies all over the world. But what made El Salvador interesting is that the actual government looked like they were embracing the Bitcoin ethos and moving towards a Bitcoin standard. That was the hope. It's like, oh, finally, we have a country that is moving outside the clutches of this kind of globalist fiat system and taking a route that is much more sovereign and independent and embracing Bitcoin as a path to get there. And, this IMF news, I think, is a big letdown in regards to people that had that hope originally for El Salvador, because that's the way I saw it. I was like, wow, El Salvador has figured out the value proposition of, embracing the Bitcoin ethos and moving towards a Bitcoin standard. That sound money, if you adopt it and you let people actually save and you give people private property rights to the degree that they can now, hold a monetary instrument that doesn't get devalued over time, right? It empowers not only the individual, but it's going to empower your society. And for a lot of people, I think the vision was that there was going to be a renaissance that happened here, because in the city-states of like Italy and during the Renaissance there, a lot of that was fueled by the gold standard, right? Mm-hmm. And now it looks like that comes into question. What do you think?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things to say about that, and especially is about the failure of the massive Bitcoin adoption among the population, among locals here in El Salvador. That has failed, and the different efforts on education coming from private institutions and public institutions as well, they might go too slow for the times required. Mm-hmm. So, El Salvador is in a difficult financial situation. And I've seen some takes from Bitcoiners today that they say that you don't go to the IMF if you are not desperate for money. That's like a last resort to ask the IMF for support. So
yeah, but let me ask you something, and maybe you don't know, but it's still a topic of conversation that would be interesting to get some clarity on. But what happened to the volcano bonds, right? Why do you have to go to the IMF? Not only that, but Bukele is making friends with some very influential and rich people, right? And so is it the case that they had to go to the IMF? Man, I just wish there was another way, you know?
Probably, even though they are friends with very rich people, I don't know how much money, if they have more money than the IMF itself. And the reality is that Bitcoin is a niche market, so you maybe don't have enough millionaires that are enthusiasts, Bitcoin enthusiasts, to buy you the Volcano Bitcoin-based sovereign bonds. It's just a new technology, and maybe you don't have the market to offer it. I think they tried this private issuance of bonds, but maybe they realized it wasn't going to be possible. You have to remember that last year, 2024, there was an issuance for a hotel to be built in the near area of the airport. You remember they issued it was like a pilot of private bonds.
Yeah, I believe also it was supposed to be tokenized and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know details. It was just in passing.
Well, the news is that, this was perceived like a pilot program for the issuance of sovereign tokenized debt, and it wasn't successful at all. They didn't reach the milestones of financing they wanted to achieve. So there are being a lot of hints that suggest you that the Bitcoin bonds wasn't a viable option for a state.
It would be good to get some clarity, right? I think, I was on a Spaces with John Dennehy, and I asked him, I said, hey, man, look, it sounds like you're going on a crusade. Obviously, John Dennehy's really passionate about the IMF.
Great guy.
Yeah, because he sees it as basically a loan shark that's out there to cripple nations and bring them under the boot of the IMF and really subvert the sovereignty and the will of the people, right? All for the gain of the IMF and I guess their shareholders. So, I don't fault him for that, but I was curious, like, what's the end goal here? Like you're here posting every day about the IMF and how Salvador has capitulated. Let me just finish this point real quick. What's the end goal? And for him, he said he just wants some clarity, man. He just wants to hear from either the administration themselves or maybe the Bitcoin office. And he just wants to know what the strategy is going forward. At least acknowledge that this isn't necessarily a positive, right? That this all comes with trade-offs, and that, it would be good to get some official word on what the strategy is going forward and how this is going to impact the country and what the Bitcoin policies are going to be. And so, I thought that was a real good point. Like, really, there hasn't been any official word. And I think Samson Mao has tweeted this several times now too, saying, hey, man, since there's no official word, I'm going to go ahead and try to break down the changes to the Bitcoin law. But it would be really good if we got some official words from the administration, from the Bitcoin office.
Yeah, you need the official version of what's happening. And for me, it's definitely a public relations mistake not to address the Bitcoin community and the international community about this issue.